Mike Reynolds hadn't slept properly in weeks. His hands were calloused, his back ached constantly, and the bags under his eyes had turned into permanent shadows. Every morning, he woke up before the sun and kissed his sleeping son on the forehead before heading to the auto shop. 14 hours later, he'd return, too tired to eat, but never too tired to listen to Tyler's stories from school, or at least pretend to, before nodding off on the couch. Tyler was 8, a bright, curious kid who loved dinosaurs and outer space. But Tyler had asthma. Kind that came out of nowhere and hit hard, leaving him gasping like a fish out of water. Mike did everything he could to manage it. Borrowed inhalers from kind neighbors, bought discount meds from shady online sites, kept Tyler away from dusty garages and cold air. But asthma didn't care about effort. It came when it wanted. That Thursday started like any other. Mike fixed a transmission by noon, rotated 3 sets of tires, skipped lunch, and still got yelled at by his boss for taking too long. By 6 p.m., he was on the bus, Tyler at his side, both of them worn down and quiet. Tyler held his backpack to his chest, his breath already slightly shallow from the unventilated shop air. Mike noticed, but tried not to panic. "Just hold on, buddy. We're almost home." But 3 stops later, it happened. Tyler clutched his chest, his small body jerking forward. His breath came in sharp, wheezing gasps, his eyes wide, panicked. Mike dropped everything, grabbed his son, tried to help him sit upright, begged the driver to skip the next few stops. "Please, my son. He's having an attack. I need to get to the hospital. Please." The driver hesitated, then nodded and pulled toward the nearest intersection. Mike carried Tyler off the bus, running 3 blocks with his son in his arms. People staring, cars honking. He didn't care. Tyler was slipping. The emergency room lights buzzed overhead as he burst in, gasping, sweating. "My son. He's having an asthma attack. He needs help." A nurse looked up, glanced at the ragged man and the child in his arms. "Does he have insurance?" Mike hesitated. That pause, it was always a mistake. I don't. But please, he can't breathe." The nurse signaled to someone behind the glass. A woman in scrubs came out, looked at Tyler's blue lips, then back at Mike. "You'll need to sign a waiver. We can stabilize him, but any extended care, just help him. Please." "You think I care about paperwork right now?" They took Tyler from his arms. Mike stood there, shaking, watching his only child disappear behind metal doors. His heart thundered in his chest. His hands wouldn't stop trembling. He sank into the nearest chair, jaw clenched, staring at the floor. 5 minutes later, a security guard walked over. "Sir, if you're not registered here, we'll need you to wait outside." Mike blinked. "My son is back there." The guard didn't flinch. "You'll be called if there's news." Mike stepped outside. Cold air, silence, and then helplessness. The same helplessness he'd known when his wife died during childbirth, when bills piled up faster than he could pay, when bosses offered overtime but no benefits. He felt like he was drowning every single day, and today, he was just trying to keep his son breathing. But that night, something would happen inside that hospital, something that would turn all of it upside down. Mike stood outside the hospital's glass doors, arms crossed, his breath rising in short puffs into the cold night air. He could still hear Tyler's shallow gasps echoing in his mind. Minutes felt like hours. He paced, rubbed his face, then sat on the curb, ready to run back inside the moment anyone called his name. Then, the sliding doors burst open behind him. 2 nurses were shouting to each other, wheeling in a woman on a stretcher. Mike barely caught a glimpse. High heels, a silk scarf, a pearl earring clinging to her lobe, like it belonged to another world. Her face was pale, lips colorless, eyelids fluttering. She looked rich, important, and unconscious. Inside, chaos followed. Nurses called for doctors. A man in a dark suit barked into a phone. "She's crashing. Her vitals are dropping." We need her blood type confirmed now. Mike hovered near the doorway. Forgotten. Another nurse rushed in with a clipboard. AB negative. We've got none in stock. Closest donor is 3 hours out. 3 hours? She won't make it that long. The doctor looked around the ER. Check the database. See if anyone's here who matches. Mike stepped forward. Before he even thought it through. I'm AB negative. The room went quiet. For a moment, nobody seemed to believe him. Then one nurse pulled him aside, rapidly confirming his blood type, scanning his ID, checking vitals. Are you sure you want to do this? She's not family. You don't even know her. Mike looked past the nurse, back toward the hallway where they'd taken his son. I'm sure. 15 minutes later, he was lying in a curtained-off donation bay, a needle in his arm, a clear bag slowly filling with deep red. He stared at the ceiling tiles, each one stained slightly different, like patches of sky he couldn't reach. He didn't ask who she was. He didn't care. The nurse tried to make small talk, said he had good veins, said not many people would have volunteered so quickly. Mike barely heard her. All he could think was, I hope my son is still breathing. When it was over, he stood up too quickly, felt dizzy, grabbed the edge of the table. You need to sit for a bit, sir. You gave a lot. Take a few minutes. But Mike was already moving toward the hallway. Again. He wanted to see his boy. Wanted to hear someone say Tyler was okay. As he passed the main lobby, he saw them, a group of people in expensive coats, polished shoes, speaking into earpieces. A tall man in a gray suit pointed toward the private elevator. She's stable. Transfer her to the East Wing. No press. No names. Keep it quiet. Mike caught a glimpse of the woman, now conscious, eyes open, still pale but breathing. She didn't even glance in his direction. One of her aides stepped between them, blocking his view. This area's restricted. Please return to the waiting area. That was it. No thank you. No handshake. No glance. No name. Just a man who gave his blood and got pushed back into the background. Mike stumbled back to the bench in the waiting area, legs heavy, the world spinning a little. He sat down slowly, rubbed his hands together, and leaned his head back against the cold wall. He didn't know it yet, but everything in his life had just changed. The morning light felt like sandpaper against Mike's eyes. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours. After the transfusion, he had stayed at the hospital all night, sitting in a chair outside Tyler's room. His son was stable now, sleeping peacefully, an oxygen tube under his nose. That was all that mattered. But duty didn't care about exhaustion. By 7 a.m., Wakes was back at the auto shop, smelling of antiseptic and sweat. His boss gave him a look but didn't say anything. Just handed him the keys to an old Dodge pickup and barked something about brakes. Mike worked in a daze. The wrench in his hand felt heavier than usual. His body was drained, but his mind kept circling back to Tyler's tiny gasping breaths. He barely noticed the sound of heels clicking across the concrete floor until they stopped right behind him. Excuse me, are you Michael Reynolds? He stood up slowly, wiped his hands on a rag, and turned around. The woman in front of him looked completely out of place. Sleek black heels, a crisp white blazer, hair tied into a perfect twist. She had the kind of calm presence that made people instinctively stand straighter. Yeah, he said, puzzled. Who's asking? She smiled politely. My name is Ava. I work for Ms. Eliza Richmond. She asked me to find you. She'd like to speak with you in person. Mike blinked. Who? Eliza Richmond. He stared at her blankly. I don't know who that is. Ava tilted her head. You donated blood last night at St. Jude's Hospital. You saved her life. Mike stepped back, stunned. Wait. The woman I Jude. She's... Ava nodded. Yes. She's the founder and owner of Richmond Health Systems. She built that hospital. Actually, she owns 15 hospitals across the state. Last night she was visiting anonymously, testing how her staff and systems perform when she's not in the spotlight. Mike couldn't speak for a moment. The same woman who had been wheeled in on a stretcher, who looked like she belonged in a magazine, had been the one behind all of this. She didn't tell anyone who she was. Ava continued. It was part of her protocol, an unannounced audit. She collapsed before she could even finish the tour. Your donation stabilized her until her personal team arrived. She wants to meet you immediately, if you're available. Mike looked down at his oil-stained boots. His grease-covered hands. He hadn't showered. He hadn't shaved. He didn't even know how to respond. I'm just a mechanic. Why would someone like that want to meet me? Because, Ava said, you didn't ask for anything. Not a reward. Not even a name. You gave blood to a stranger with no expectation of return. That kind of act means something to her. More than you can imagine. Mike's boss had come out of the office by now, arms crossed, already annoyed. You leaving or what? Mike looked at him, then back at Ava. Where is she? She's waiting in her office. We have a car outside. Mike wiped his hands once more, took a deep breath, and nodded. All right, let's go. He still didn't understand what was happening. But something told him this wasn't just a thank you visit, it was the beginning of something far bigger than he ever expected. The elevator to the top floor of the hospital was silent, almost too smooth. Mike stood stiffly beside Ava, still feeling like a smudge on a clean window. His work boots made soft, embarrassed squeaks against the polished floor. Then the doors slid open. Sunlight poured in through a wall of glass. The office was enormous, modern, but warm. Bookshelves, lined with medical journals and photographs, awards on the walls, a view of the city like something from a dream. And there, sitting behind a desk made of dark oak, was her, Eliza Richmond, alive, composed, dressed in soft gray silk, her posture effortless, her eyes sharp but kind. She stood as he entered. Mr. Reynolds, she said, with a calm smile. Please, come in. He hesitated. She gestured gently to the chair across from her. I insist. Mike sat down like a man who thought he might fall through the floor. She studied him for a moment before speaking again. You saved my life. I know people say that casually, but in this case it is quite literal. Without your blood, I would not be here. Mike looked down, fidgeting with the hem of his jacket. I was just there. I didn't know who you were, I thought. I mean, anyone would have done the same. Eliza's expression didn't change, but something in her voice deepened. No, they wouldn't have. I've seen people look away when help was needed. You didn't, and more than that, I saw how you held your son, how you fought for him. I asked the staff. I know you had no insurance, no safety net, but you stayed. She folded her hands in front of her on the desk. I've been searching for someone like you. Blinked. Someone like me. Yes, she said. I run these hospitals, but I rarely see what happens in them from the ground. I have people, reports, data, but none of them show me what a single father goes through at midnight with an asthmatic child and empty pockets, or what someone does when asked to give without knowing who's asking. She leaned forward slightly. That's why I want to offer you something, a job, full-time, as my personal field assistant. You'd travel, visit our facilities unannounced, experience the system the way everyday people do, and tell me the truth. Mike stared at her, frozen. I don't have a degree. I'm not a doctor. I change brake pads. She smiled softly. And that's exactly why I want you. You know what matters to real people. You see what we miss. She reached into a folder and slid a page across the desk. The position comes with a salary, $120,000 a year to start. Housing. A full scholarship for your son at any private school in our network. And of course, full medical coverage. Mike didn't touch the paper. He just sat there, breathing slowly, as if afraid the moment might dissolve if he moved too quickly. Why? Me. Because, she said, sometimes the best way to fix a broken system is by trusting someone who's already lived through its cracks. He didn't realize tears had reached the edge of his eyes until he blinked, and one rolled down his cheek. He wiped it away, quickly, and nodded. All right, he whispered, I'll do it. And just like that, his world shifted. Not because he'd asked for anything, but because, in the worst moment, he had given everything. The offer hung in the air, like a dream. Mike couldn't trust. After leaving Eliza's office, he didn't take the elevator. He walked down every flight of stairs, needing to feel the ground under his feet again. It was too good, too perfect. People like him didn't get handed lifelines tied with silk ribbons. He had spent his whole life clawing to stay afloat, watching others get the breaks while he worked double shifts. Now some billionaire in designer shoes was offering him a job that sounded like it came from a movie. He didn't believe in magic, and he definitely didn't believe in rich people doing things without strings attached. That night, he sat in the one-bedroom apartment, with Ty asleep on the couch, inhaler beside his little hand. Mike looked at the paper Eliza had given him. Salary, benefits, education, medical care, a life they had never even dreamed of. $1 they never even dreamed of. But still, something gnawed at him. Why, me? What does she really want? He tossed the paper onto the counter and decided no, he wasn't some pawn in a billionaire's experiment. He wasn't going to sell himself, no matter how nice the price tag looked. The next morning, he went back to his old job at the auto shop. He didn't tell anyone about the meeting. Didn't want to sound crazy, but fate doesn't wait politely for doubts to pass. That afternoon, while he was bent under the hood of a rusted-out truck, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Something told him not to. When he answered, he heard panic. Mr. Reynolds? This is from Ridgeway Elementary. Your son had another asthma episode. It's serious. Mike dropped the wrench. Time slowed as he raced to the school, heart pounding harder than his footsteps. He burst into the nurse's office and saw Ty, gasping, his face pale, hands trembling. The ambulance was already there. But this time, when they reached the hospital, something was different. The moment the paramedic gave Mike's name, the nurse behind the desk stood up and nodded. Right this way, we've been notified. Mike was stunned. No forms. No waiting room. No insurance arguments. They rushed Ty to a private pediatric room. 2 doctors were already there, reviewing charts. Is this a mistake? Mike whispered to himself. But Ty got care. The best care. Within an hour, he was stable. Smiling weakly. Breathing again. Mike sat beside his son, holding his hand, trying to understand what had just happened. Then Ava appeared in the doorway. She told me you turned down the offer, she said calmly. But she also told me not to push. Just to let you see for yourself. Mike stared at her. You did all this. Why? Because she meant what she said, Ava replied. She doesn't need more executives in suits. She needs people who know what it's like when no one listens. People like you. Mike looked back at Ty. The little boy was finally sleeping peacefully. He exhaled slowly, as if the weight of years had finally started to lift. Tell her, I'll take the job, he said. But I still don't understand why she chose me. Ava smiled. Maybe it's not about understanding. Maybe it's just about being the right person in the right moment. Mike didn't reply. He just sat there, holding his son's hand tighter than ever, because for the first time in years, the world had opened a door. Weeks passed. Mike had never worn a suit before, let alone been paid to sit at boardroom tables. At first, he felt like an imposter, a mechanic pretending to play executive. But Eliza never treated him like that. She listened. She asked questions. She took notes when he spoke about what it meant to be broke, scared, and invisible in the healthcare system. One afternoon, after a long meeting reviewing a troubled community program, she asked him to walk with her through the hospital garden. Mike hesitated, unsure if it was business or something more personal. But he followed. She didn't speak for a while, just walked slowly between the hedges, her heels clicking softly against the stone path. Finally, she stopped by a small bench beneath a willow tree. "Mike, do you know why I chose you?" He shrugged. "You said you saw something in me. I still don't know what." She looked away for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke. "I was a single mother too, barely 20. My son's name was Jacob. Barely 20. My son's name was Jacob." Mike blinked. He had never heard her mention a family. "When he was 5, he got pneumonia. We didn't have insurance. I was working 2 jobs just trying to feed him. The hospital made me wait in a hallway for hours. By the time they saw him, it was too late." Mike didn't know what to say. His chest tightened. "I couldn't save him," she whispered. "And after that, I made a decision. I would never be powerless again." She turned to face him, her voice steady. "Now, so I studied. I worked, I built this empire. But the power doesn't matter if I forget what it's like to be on the other side of that waiting room door." Mike sat down on the bench, quiet. Everything made sense now, the job, the benefits, the way she had looked at Ty like she already loved him. "You saw yourself in me," he said slowly. She nodded. "Yes, and I couldn't walk away like others did when I was begging for help." He looked down at his hands. "You saved my son," he said. "I won't forget that." Eliza gave a faint smile, but then her face hardened slightly. "Not everyone thinks I made the right call. The board has been watching me." Mike frowned. "Why?" "Because I'm spending more on care and less on profit. They think I've gone soft, that I'm letting my emotions cloud my judgment." He could feel her frustration beneath the calm tone, "So they're trying to push me out." Behind closed doors. Quiet. Votes. Back room whispers. Mike stood. "That's insane. This place is better because of you." She nodded. "I know. But business doesn't reward empathy, Mike. It rewards growth charts. And I've given them something they don't like. Compassion." Mike's jaw tightened. "What are you going to do?" She looked at him with something like hope. "That's why I brought you here. I need someone who sees both sides. Someone who can help me fight, not just with numbers, but with truth." He didn't answer immediately. But he understood now. This wasn't just a job. It was a war. And Eliza Richmond had chosen him to stand at her side. The tension in the hospital grew thicker by the day. Whispers followed Eliza through the hallways. Meetings ended abruptly when she entered the room. Even Mike felt the cold stares of executives in tailored suits, people who viewed him as an outsider who didn't belong. Then, one morning, it happened. A surprise audit team arrived at the hospital, not internal. Federal Department of Health and Human Services had received an anonymous tip. Allegations of neglect, insurance fraud, and patient endangerment. Mike watched the chaos unfold. Executives scrambling, nurses whispering, Doctors suddenly too busy to meet anyone's eye. Eliza remained calm. She gathered her leadership team and faced the investigators head-on. But the board smelled blood. They saw the audit as the perfect opportunity to oust her once and for all. Mike wasn't called in at first. He kept to his routine, reviewing social programs, checking in with families, making quiet notes. Until one of the investigators asked a simple question. Did anyone witness discriminatory treatment on the ER floor? Mike raised his hand, and then everything changed. He told them what he saw that night. How nurses ignored his pleas. How no one looked twice at his son, wheezing and gasping for air, because they assumed he couldn't pay. How the same staff leapt into action when a wealthy-looking woman collapsed, only to vanish with her into the private wing. He spoke with a quiet fire, not rehearsed, not polished, but real. I get it, he said. You don't think poor folks matter until they do. Until they turn out to be someone important. But you don't get to gamble on people's lives like that. My son could have died. If she hadn't passed out in the same lobby, I'd be burying him now. The investigators listened. Some wrote notes. Others just watched him, surprised, and then he added the final blow. That woman you saved last minute, she owns this hospital. Silence. In the days that followed, the auditors dug deeper, staff were interviewed, security footage reviewed. A pattern emerged. People with money or influence were treated differently. Those without it, ignored, delayed, sometimes harmed. But Mike's testimony did more than expose flaws. It humanized the problem. He wasn't an executive. He wasn't trying to climb a ladder. He was a father who spoke the truth. Eliza thanked him quietly after the hearing. No speeches, just one sentence. You changed everything. A week later, the board vote failed. The motion to remove Eliza Richmond lost by 2 votes. 2 executives flipped after reading the audit report. She kept her position. But more importantly, she won the right to push forward, with reforms, with oversight, with real changes that would ripple beyond her walls. And at the center of it all was Mike. The mechanic turned witness. The single dad who walked into a hospital just trying to save his son and ended up saving hundreds more. 1 year later, the hospital lobby looked completely different. There was a new wing for uninsured patients. Clean, well-equipped, and fully staffed. A sign above the entrance read, "The Tyler Ward." Mike didn't know about it until the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Eliza kept it a surprise. He stood there in disbelief, watching his son pull off the cloth, covering the sign, with a proud little grin on his face. Tyler, now 9, healthy and full of energy, stood tall in his neatly pressed school uniform. The same uniform all the students wore at the prestigious Brookdale Academy, where he was now enrolled on full scholarship. Mike had traded his oil-stained work boots for a clean suit, but he still walked with the same steady purpose. He wasn't fixing engines anymore. He was building something bigger. As the new director of community access programs for the Richmond Health Network, he now oversaw outreach projects, transportation for patients, and emergency relief efforts for families in need. People listened when he spoke, not because he had a degree or a title, though now he had both, but because he knew what it meant to sit in a plastic ER chair, holding a child who couldn't breathe, and be ignored. Eliza remained by his side, quietly supportive. She didn't micromanage. She trusted him, because she remembered, too, what it meant to lose everything. Her late son's name was now part of a scholarship fund for single parents pursuing medical careers. Sometimes, after long meetings, Mike would look out the window of his modest office, sipping coffee and watching the bustle of the city below. He thought of that night, a year ago, The metal bench, the panic, the blood donation. It felt like another life. Tyler ran through the doors, backpack bouncing, full of stories about school projects and science fairs. Mike would lift him into a hug, just like he always had. Except now, he wasn't worried about tomorrow. His back no longer ached from overwork. His hands weren't covered in grease. He slept full nights. Not out of exhaustion, but peace. And every so often, he still walked past the ER lobby, where it all began. Same tiles. Same vending machines. But the staff now greeted patients with kindness. They looked people in the eye. Because one man had spoken up. Because one woman had remembered. Because one act of selfless courage had changed more than one life. And as the screen fades to black, a quiet voice echoes. One decision. One needle. One act of kindness. And a whole life changed. Forever.